to the Russell Scott Show.
Dr. Walt Brown, welcome back to the program.
Oh, good afternoon.
Dr. Walt Brown is the world's leading expert in the field of JFK assassination research. He is the author of 6 books on the subject, including Treachery in Dallas, The Warren Omission, and his 30,000-plus page chronology of the JFK assassination. For today, I want to cover the well-known JFK conspiracy theories. And my favorite, did the driver shoot Kennedy?
There's no way to prove a negative to a certainty. You can't prove he didn't, but the short version is he didn't. That story started floating in the 1970s, and then a guy named Milton Cooper took it up, and he went all over the country doing the dog and pony show with that and flying saucers. He showed the Zapruder film and pointed out in one frame what looks like a flash. It's a reflection of the sun off Roy Kellerman's forehead. Anybody that's watched the film, the driver never takes his hands off the wheel. The guy's not Annie Oakley. If he had done it, he would have had to fire through Connolly. The one thing that people always point out about the Zapruder film is, well, you know, he goes backward and to the left because you see the impact on the front right. And the driver is off to the left. It's the same story about, you know, well, the car stopped. The motorcade stopped. The follow-up car stopped. It's human nature. If you're driving an automobile, if you look into the back seat of that automobile, you're going to reach for the brake. I don't know anybody alive turns over his shoulder to see what's going on in the back seat and hammers the gas pedal. So the car did slow down, but it didn't stop. The driver of the car could not, by Secret Service rules, accelerate until he was told to do so by a superior officer. When Kellerman said, "Get out of here, we're hit," then he was authorized to hit the gas pedal. Of course, the car weighed 7,500 pounds with armor plating underneath, and 1,000 pounds of people in it. It's going to take a little while to burn up the highway. Bill Greer was just devastated by the whole thing. He drove Kennedy all day except from the hospital to the airplane. But from the airplane to Bethesda, he was the driver. From Bethesda back to the White House, he was the driver. And I think he did some driving as far as the funeral was related. Later on, you know, when Mrs. Kennedy was out of the public eye, he characterized Greer's reflexes as not unlike those of Maud Shaw, who was the nanny to Marilyn and John Jr. But those guys weren't trained. I can't imagine Bill Greer ever having fired a gun. He had no reason to. Because driver agents were not trained the same way as regular protective agents were. And there were several driver agents on duty in Dallas because they were so short of manpower. If there's a conspiracy theory anywhere in there, it's that it was a 5-city trip in 2 days, which means you've got guys shuttling everywhere. They got to be at the Trade Mart at 8 in the morning while Kennedy's still in Fort Worth. The group that leaves Kennedy at 8 in the morning, when Kennedy gives a speech and has the breakfast, they're already flying to Austin. And they're in Austin, asleep, when the assassination happened. The other Secret Service story that the follow-up car, George Hickey, fired the AR-15. I don't know if you were going to get into that one. He was a driver agent also, so he wasn't trained the way the field agents were, protective agents. And the guy sitting on the opposite side on top of him was Glenn Bennett, and he was from the protective research section. He was an accountant. And that's where the protection was that day. Which is to say there wasn't much.
Speaking of protection, the Mafia, La Cosa Nostra, did they have Kennedy whacked?
I don't think so. If they did, that theory is tenable. I would want anybody to tell me the second most important person that they ever had killed. Because it'd be some local sheriff. Or the mayor of some town that ran the prostitutes out. You just don't kill a president of the United States. In the movie JFK, Kevin Costner says, you know, assassinations require payrolls. The mob had the money for it. They had the means, the motive, the opportunity. The bottom line was they didn't need to do it. Because somebody else was going to do it. Were they upset with Bobby Kennedy? To a degree. he was he was solving part of their problem by downsizing the small fish, but he did get a couple of the big names kind of rattled. He had Marcello deported. I mean, they dumped him in Guatemala in the clothes he'd been wearing when they took him off the street. John Kennedy got mob money to run his campaign. You can't put any kind of chain of people together. And again, if they did, who's the second most important person that the mob ever killed? If you're going to kill a president, you got to take at least credit for a couple of popes, some senators, somebody.
Jimmy Hoffa didn't happen until quite a bit later. Yeah.
75.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just down the road from me, according to one theory, buried under Giant Stadium. New Jersey is the epicenter of the mob. The Sopranos was 10 miles from here. I mean, that's just mob central.
So if it was the mob, you'd know about it.
I wrote a story one time, and I said, I didn't think the mob did it. I said, but if they were going to do it, they would have done it differently. I think I shared this with you when we were talking one time, off the air. They're going to do it. God help them if they fail. And immediately that rules out Lee Oswald. You're going to have a half a dozen professionals from all angles. You're not going to invest in Lee Oswald with a $12 gun that was war surplus junk. I always figured if the mob was going to do it, they would have had a utility truck parked under the triple underpass, maybe on Tuesday. And they would have, just closed off one lane, packed the underneath of the triple underpass with high explosive. When the car got 10 feet away, somebody on the corner of Main and Houston would have flicked a switch. Boom. The car would have been incinerated. They would have succeeded in what they wanted to do, removing the president. But there would have been sympathy for Jackie, for the governor of Texas, for the Secret Service agents that were killed, and it would have diminished the assassination. As I said in that story that I wrote, the kill switch would have been mailed to Joe Kennedy Sr.
Do you think it's fair to call the assassination a false flag event?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Simply because clearly it's reality-based. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't like somebody's gun went off by mistake and the president was killed. He was killed. There was a multi-billion-dollar war, claimed over 1 million lives, as a result of his being killed, as a direct result of his being killed. So there's
Gulf of Tonkin.
Yeah, which is not.
That's
not
probably
the
more
last,
the false flag event, but in tandem with the JFK assassination.
We've been plagued in American history by boats. The American Revolution came about because of the Boston Tea Party throwing the stuff off the boats. The War of 1812 was impressment. Civil War started when we sent boats into Fort Sumter. The Spanish-American War started with Remember the Maine. World War I started with the sinking of too many ships. And World War II was Pearl Harbor.
9/11 was a plane.
But yes, it was. It was 2 planes. Actually, I think it was 2 planes. Fetzer thinks otherwise.
Well, Fetzer thinks it was video fakery.
It was image fakery. But the best-selling fiction book in the United States on 9/11, New York Times #1 bestseller, book called Valhalla Rising by Clive Cussler.
Mm-hmm.
And in that story, there was a plot among people in the Arab nations to fill 2 oil tankers chock full of high explosives, get them as close to the New Jersey shoreline as you could, and then run them as fast as you could right into the base of the World Trade Center, which was right on the water. And that was the bestseller on 9/11. It came true, but it turned out to be planes. It just means it was more technological.
Mm-hmm. The late, great Gaddafi, he said Israel did it. I tie that in because I know a lot of people like to think that the Mossad may have had some play on 9/11.
Yeah, and Kennedy as well.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Gaddafi believed that the Mossad was behind the JFK hit due to nuclear anti-proliferation.
The best videos of 9/11 were made by Israeli intelligence. They were on the scene, ready to shoot. But they weren't the only people that knew what was going on 9/11. The stock market was fully prepared for it. There were people saying, don't fly. It was not a deep secret. The Kennedy assassination...
Well, then how does the president himself not know, if it's not a secret? You think the president might have been told by someone. Psst.
If he didn't read the intelligence report that that he was given in August, then he's negligent. But the intelligence report clearly said something was coming.
Well, then let me ask you this, Walt. Do you think Kennedy knew that there was a chance he was going to get assassinated that day?
He knew he was going into Dallas, and he knew what it meant. Kennedy had always been a riverboat gambler, and he always, rolled the dice and took his chances, and that's what he did on November 22nd, and he lost. He'd been talking about it for a couple of days with people around him, saying, somebody wanted to kill me. So all I got to do is get high up in a building with a rifle, or be willing to trade their life for mine. Go running out of the crowd with 2 hand grenades in their pocket and jump in the back seat, and the explosion and kill everybody. Do I think he had an awareness of what was possible? Absolutely. He went in there to beat them at their own game. To me, the proof of that is the speech that he did not live to deliver at the trademark was in your face to Dallas and in your face to right-wing extremism and hatred. It was a sharp rebuke to the kind of Dallas politics that were prevalent. That's critical. And I've always said John Kennedy was his own profile in courage. Unfortunately, the last profile of John Kennedy that you really see is a Zapruder Frame 313. The fact that it would militate against it was that Jackie was sitting next to him. Would he have taken her someplace where he was at risk? I don't know that he would. When he released his son to the Secret Service agent, Bob Foster, the day before, he said, "Mr. Foster, take care of John." And Foster, for a time, believed that there was a finality to his statement. As for the Mossad being involved, I don't think they could take the risk. But
I know they're a common scapegoat.
Oh, yeah.
Mossadniks did it,
If the mob or Mossad had tried that and failed, Israel wouldn't exist today. Because if the United States ever walked away from Israel, forget it. Sure, Israel's got nuclear weapons, but the Arabs don't care.
8 million a day, I think, in aid from the United States. They're
It's
well
more than-
taken care of.
It's more than just aid. We're Big Brother. We're standing not behind them. We're standing in front of them. Well, the USS Liberty event. I don't know.
Yes,
if you're
I'm
aware.
aware of that.
And that's everything you need to know. The United States was setting up Arab nations to get hit with nuclear weapons because the United States was attacked. And of course, we were attacked by Israeli jets that were unmarked. A couple dozen Americans were killed. That was in June of 67. It wouldn't have been noticed in June of 68 because that's when Bobby Kennedy was killed. Here we are in the United States today on March 1st with the sequester. There's talk of 750,000 people losing their jobs. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But the second news item last night was that we've decided to give millions in aid to Syrian rebels. There's something wrong with one of those two news items.
There's a lot wrong with what's going on, Walt. Egypt, Libya, Syria, Iraq, Iran, it's all tied in.
Well, it'll be different when I'm king.
I don't know how you're going to be king when I'm emperor. The KGB, of course, that would have been a far more popular theory, I imagine, in the 60s.
Yeah. Komitet Gososardzvenoye Bezopasnosti. KGB. Or in Russia, they say KGB. No, not one chance in 1,000. Kennedy was Khrushchev's savior. By turning down the volume on the Cold War the way he did, he saved Khrushchev. I could never see that. The Soviet Union ultimately went bust when it did in '89 because they bankrupted themselves trying vainly to compete in some form of arms race. They couldn't do it because they're an agricultural nation. The United States is an industrial nation. An agricultural nation can never keep up with an industrial nation. Although, credit where credit is due, the KGB was a far more efficient killing machine than anything in modern times. And certainly were better at what they did than the CIA ever was. The CIA is just a front for all the intelligence agencies. KGB was very efficient at what they did, but for them to take Kennedy out of the picture and replace him with a known hawk like Johnson, that does not serve their interest at all. The other thing that you have to stir into the equation somehow is that the Vietnam War was fought against a backdrop of, and I'm going to call them rules, that were never published. You know, the United States could bomb this place or that place or this place or that place, but we couldn't bomb this other place or this other place. We could have bombed the dams in Hanoi, put Hanoi out of business for good, but we couldn't, because that was one of the rules. Yet there were...
The business of war.
Yeah, there were millions and millions of tons of bombs, carpet bombs, just, on the peasants, just for the sheer hell of it. But certain bombing targets to win the war, that was against the rules. And of course the rules were, again, not made public. We didn't have WikiLeaks in those days.
This is why Colin Powell quit the military, because their goal in any one war is not to win it. There's no exit strategy.
No.
It's all about how long can we be there, what are we going to make on it?
Yep, and that's what you and I spoke about the last time. A lot of captains were looking ahead to Vietnam and thinking, imagining themselves being called colonel. Exit strategies went out the window after World War II. It was still in Korea, and that's 60 years after it ended. When there's an American football game on, they'll always make a mention of American service personnel, who are serving abroad in 175 countries. What do we need service people for in 175 countries? Well, some of them are embassy guards and that kind of thing. But we got too many people in too many places.
On June 4th, 1963, President Kennedy signed an order that gave authority to the Secretary of the Treasury to issue silver certificates. The order, known as Executive Order 11110, was intended to serve as an interim measure while the government attempted to reduce the amount of silver being used to mint coins. The Federal Reserve killed Kennedy. Any credence to that?
Coincidentally, that became a blip on the radar the same year as the federal income tax was created by a constitutional amendment.
It was 1913 on Jekyll Island that the...
Yeah. Because income tax had been ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, so they needed a constitutional amendment to make it obviously constitutional.
Because you couldn't tax a man's labor, yeah.
The Federal Reserve Board is an incredible financial engine. They broker all of the money into the economy. They do it for a negligible amount, like 17 cents on $100,000. You say, well, peanuts, yeah. And every day they turn over $178 billion or something like that. So there's money involved. But there's a lot of confusion. The silver certificates, it was a stopgap measure and it didn't work. Because silver certificates were being issued long before the order you talked about, June 4th. And they were redeemable. It says they're redeemable, in silver. There wasn't enough silver. Because they were basically paying out silver dollars. And they were down to the last few million. And coin collectors or coin dealers were going into banks and getting hundreds and hundreds of $1 bills and turning them in to get silver dollars. And if they got 1,000 silver dollars and 10 of them were really valuable, they made a killing. So there was a run on the silver. Then they started printing what were called United States notes. Now everything today is Federal Reserve notes, but they printed United States notes, which Lincoln had done as a stopgap measure at the time of the Civil War. Paper money was never particularly trusted. It's still wallpaper today.
You're telling me that the last person that tried to do what Kennedy did was Lincoln?
Yeah, and he was, what happened to him?
Do you not find that particularly interesting? I mean...
Oh, it's unavoidable. I mean, you can't walk around that one. One of the corollaries to the Federal Reserve did it is that these U.S. notes were printed in denominations of $2 bills, $5 bills, and $100 bills. And in 1963, the only way you saw a $100 bill was if you tripped over a millionaire. Now you go grocery shopping and take a couple of them with you. But back then, when I was a kid in 1963, if somebody had a $20 bill, it was, wow. And there were 2s, 5s, and 100s. And they did not stop printing them until 1971. So the story that Kennedy was killed and they disappeared, not correct.
Yeah,
They
I've seen them
were-
in the auctions.
Oh, I get a bunch of them. Yeah, I mean, they're worth face value. My bank, I tell them, anytime you get old money, pre-Bush money, the stuff that Bush put out there to me is monopoly money. If you get pre-Bush money, save it for me. Why did I said I want people to think I came from old money. And they had $930 today, just this morning. $500 of which was brand new, uncirculated, consecutive digits, $10 bills. Like they were printed yesterday, series 1991 or something like, brand new.
They're talking about, or Obama's talking about getting rid of the penny.
They cost 7 cents to make them.
Listen, if somebody told me 6 years ago that Obama would leave you penniless, I wouldn't have argued with him.
I know there was a story, and this is again off the track. There was a story that some government vehicle was delivering a cartload of pennies to a Federal Reserve Bank, and it went off the road down into a ditch, and they had to account for like $57 million in pennies. Out of a swamp. They probably spent $5.7 million cleaning the swamp out to get the damn pennies.
They just sent 10 guys. They
Yeah,
just
and
started rolling them there.
And magnets.
Can you pick up copper with a magnet?
I don't know. I've never tried. Don't try this at home. I think eventually we'll go to all paper currency.
Oh, really? I think the other way around.
It was
In
the other way
Canada,
around.
we eliminated the $1 and the $2 bill and went to the loonie and the toonie. And then, of course, we've eliminated the penny. And I'm thinking it's just a matter of time before we see the $5 coin and the $10 coin.
One of the raging issues for the 1800s in the United States was hard money versus paper money.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to William Jennings Bryan, crucified on a cross of gold. Paper money, it's easier. I'd hate to have to go someplace and try to buy a Mercedes with bags of quarters.
But if the quarters had true value in terms of their...
Yeah, which they don't.
No, they don't. Not now, they certainly don't. But
No,
if they were
and-
silver quarters and they had an actual intrinsic silver value, you'd prefer the quarter.
Sure. Absolutely. It's why gold is selling for $1,600, $1,700 an ounce.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing you can do with it. You're not going to make a building out of gold because it's too soft. It's too malleable. But for some reason, some mystic reason, it always maintains value.
Well, it's truly rare. It is a rare mineral.
Yeah. The Russians bought up 853 metric tons of it in the last 3 years. They're trying to, get into the gold business. They're 8th in the world now in gold ownership. That meteor that hit Russia in the recent days was the size of a bus, but it weighed 7,000 tons. So they're set for metals for a while. Bus, 7,000 tons.
Hey, I got a question. Did Lee Harvey Oswald shoot Kennedy?
No.
Was he ever looking down the barrel of a gun at John F. Kennedy?
At John F. Kennedy, I don't believe so.
So how could the patsy have been in place?
He had to think, and again, this goes back to his sophomore romance with the TV show I Led 3 Lives, which I'm trying to update script-wise for some of my friends. I call it I Dread 3 Wives. He was somehow, and this assumes that there's only one of them, because the looks that there were 2 of them are convincing. But he was somehow conned into believing that he was the super patriot. He was the patriot. And part of the proof of that is he got away with going to Russia, telling the people in the American embassy, I'm going to give the Russians American military secrets. He went on the radio in Russia and blasted America. And then he decided to come home, and we paid his way and didn't handcuff him when he got off the boat. So somebody convinced him he had patriotism in his blood, and down the road, wait and see. First of all, could he do it? No. Marksmanship is not like playing softball. First warm day in April, you pick up a bat, you're going to hit the ball. If you go from September to the first warm day in April with a weapon, you're not going to hit a small target at a distance.
Well, how far away was the gun from Kennedy?
Well, at the time of the headshot, it was 265.7 feet. The gun itself was war surplus junk. They were cannibalized. An importer bought the lot of weapons and paid by the pound, not even by the gun, by the pound. And then they took a stock here, a trigger guard over here, and just cannibalized them and put them together. Oswald's alleged weapon, and I have one of the things, and believe me when I say it's junk, was rebarreled from 7.65 millimeters to 6.5, and that was because the United States had produced the ammunition for the Mannlicher Carcano weapons during World War II. And I've checked in books, and Italy was on the other side. They were not our ally. But we were making the bullets that they were firing. Luckily, they weren't hitting anybody. Oswald was physically handicapped. He'd had a mastoid operation when he was 6 years old. It's a procedure where they remove some of the bone, in his case, his left ear. Your balance is in your ears. And Oswald was unable to do certain mechanical things that people routinely could do. He couldn't drive a car.
Listen, I'm just going to pause you there. You're the shadow government or whomever is behind all of this, and you're setting Oswald up to be the patsy.
Right.
How is it that you fuck up and you don't notice this particular problem? This man couldn't have shot a gun because he had no balance. I mean, I guess the patsy could never be perfect, but
it's assumed that 24-year-olds drive cars. It's part of the rite of passage. When you said, let me interrupt you, I was about to say, how many 24-year-old healthy males were unable to drive cars on November 22nd, 1963? I mean, on November 22nd, 1963, I was counting the days until I could get my driver's license. And it was 283 days till I could drive. Yeah, 283, 284, till I could drive at age 17 in New Jersey. And it was that way with everybody. If you went home for Christmas vacation from school, you came back, 117 days to go. Everybody drove. And this plays into the second Oswald story, because in Russia, people don't drive at 17, 18. They don't have the means. And back then, they certainly didn't. But Oswald, he got fired from the photography job that he worked on because he couldn't make the photographs the size he was supposed to make them. And that involved a little physical dexterity. Couldn't do it. They fired him. It was costing them too much money and work that had to be redone. The gun itself is junk. The ammunition is questionable because it's years and years old. Whether it's got a full pop, you don't know. And huge factor, often overlooked, supposedly Oswald took a package to the book depository that morning. Only one person saw the package go in the door. And it was a smallish package, which would have meant that the gun was disassembled. If Oswald had to assemble that gun in the book depository, it would by no means be remotely accurate, because a weapon has to be sighted in. It's like bracketing a mortar. You fire a shot, you say, okay, I had the target lined up, but the bullet was high into the right. You adjust the sight a little bit. Take another one. It's still high into the right. Take another one. Most hunters will tell you it takes 10 to 12 shots to sight in a rifle to make it accurate. If anybody tells me that Oswald just went up there, built the gun, stuck it out the window, and 2 kill shots at 265 feet, that's not going to happen.
Do you think your average American hunter would have made that shot?
Not with that gun.
So for someone to have made that shot with that gun, they would have had to have been a professional.
I'm not convinced a professional could do it. And the reason I say that, and I have a leg up slightly in this department, the FBI ran tests in the spring of '64. They built a tower 2 stories high, which is not the same as a 6th floor window, and they put targets at the equated distances when they believed the 3 shots were fired. They took 3 master experts, master weapons experts. They could take all the time they wanted to aim and fire the first shot, and then they had to work the bolt, fire a second one, work the bolt, fire a third one. The results were mixed. Some of them couldn't do it in the time that the Zapruder film clock would allow. Some of them couldn't hit all 3 targets, in the time allowed. One of those 3 experts, my weapons officer when I worked for the Justice Department, And this guy was as good as anybody that ever picked up a gun. He could be wearing 2 6-guns, pull them out of his pocket at the same time, shoot both ears off a flea, and not otherwise hurt the flea. This guy was good. And the FBI bench fired the man like a Carcano, which means you put it in a vise, like you'd use in your workshop. That gun cannot move, and you sight it at a target. And at 15 yards, with that gun bench viced, it was high and to the right, by a good 6-8 inches. At 15 yards, now you transpose that to 265 feet, you're going to miss by 20 feet. But the Warren Commission said that the high and to the right was an advantage because the car was going down and to the left.
So he...
Don't ask me.
Yeah. So he was aiming... Yeah, okay, I don't even get into that.
I can't make any sense out of it. A good shot. And I earned a master expert rating with a gun. A good shot. A guy that practices 200 rounds a day with a quality weapon, properly benched. They said, well, we saw the cartons in the book depository window where the gun was resting, and you could see the creases. If a box creases, that's not something you want to fire off. You want to fire off a windowsill or a bunch of bricks that are mortared in place that aren't going to move. An expert marksman with a quality weapon could have made the shot. There's no question about that. But somebody that hadn't shot a gun in 4.5 years, with a crummy gun that he assembled himself there and wasn't sighted in, with questionable ammunition, not a chance. Not a chance. Well, the chance is, if you shoot the gun up in the air, sure, the bullet's going to come down. That's about all you can say. But to make 2 accurate shots, not going to happen. Getting back to Oswald, he was told some kind of fairy tale, and he bought into it. I suspect there were others that had been sold the same fairy tale. It was not Kennedy. Something was going to happen on November 22nd. It was going to shake up the whole world. I think it was going to be Cuba. And hypothetically, if someone had fired a shot in Dealey Plaza and had fired the shot out into the lawn, where it was off limits that day, the people that were out in the lawn were there because they had Gene Hill, Mary Mormon, they had friends who were cops. There was not supposed to be anybody out there in that lawn. It was off limits. Fire a shot out into the lawn. Secret Service jumps all over Kennedy, protects him. Quick, get him to the airport. Get him to the LBJ Ranch because there's another barrage of Secret Service agents there. Just get him out of harm's way. He's down in Texas. The cabinet, for the most part, is in Japan. Bobby's in Washington. He's surrounded by the Texas madmen. And lo and behold, a gun is found that traces to a guy named Alec Heidel, who was a Cuban pro-Castro fanatic. Mr. Kennedy, come on, you don't get mad, you get even. This is personal. This was going to make an orphan out of your children. Let's go get Cuba. And I think Oswald and a number of people bought into that fairy tale. And they got a wake-up call when they heard the sirens. And people running into the depositories. And the president's been shot.
I wonder how long it took him to know. I've been set up. I'm a patsy.
Not long. Not long. And of course, a critical clue is, what did he do after that? He walked out of the depository and got on a bus going into traffic. An assassin is going to have at least some manner of escape plan.
Yeah.
Or he's going to have some way to draw attention away. And I said to myself, if I'm in that corner, 6th floor corner window, and I fired a shot, so what am I going to do? I'm going to grab the brass, I'm going to run up to the roof, I'm going to throw them as far north as I can, because there's nobody there. It's an empty parking lot. Then I'm going to go to the front of the building and yell, he's right down here, he's right down there, and have the whole world chasing after some phantom that is God knows where in the building. But he had no exit strategy, no escape plan. The bus stops, so he gets out and he goes to get a taxi cab. But ultimately, and he has the cab drop him off 6 blocks from where he was renting a room. Why 6 blocks? He was afraid of an ambush. He knew something was up. And of course, the housekeeper where he was staying, while Oswald was in there changing clothes, says, yeah, police car pulled up outside and honked the horn. And, of course, that could not be believed. You couldn't put that story out in the water. See, she thought it was car number 207 or 107, but that car had been sold. So she's wrong. Now, that's the equivalent of saying, if you try to call me, but you dial and get a wrong number, that the telephone was never invented. It's an absurd proposition. Just because she couldn't remember the number of the car, it means there was no car out there and there weren't cops in it honking the horn when Oswald was getting changed. Mm-hmm. And Tippett drove literally right to his death at 1:14:30. All of these people were thinking about something else happening, and the world just... As Tippett's behavior was bizarre from 12:30 onward. And he was parked at 5:01 at the final stop where Oswald would have gotten off the bus that he had gotten on by the depository. When that bus came, stopped, the door opened, Oswald didn't get out, Tippett panicked. He went ripping through town, pulled some guy over, just looked him over, didn't do anything, didn't ask license registration. Then he went into a record store. God knows why there's a crowd in there, but there was people in there. Brushed them aside, used the house phone to make a phone call, which most likely was not answered. If it was answered, Tippett didn't say a word. Put the phone down, got in his car, and drove and got killed. And there's just dynamics there that are too strange to say, well, you know, anything can happen. Something was going on. Something was going on. You know, Jack Ruby's reaction. I killed Oswald so Mrs. Kennedy wouldn't have to come for a trial. Why would she have to come for a trial? The autopsy would prove he was dead. She didn't know where the shots came from. She didn't know who fired them.
Well, why did Jack Ruby shoot Oswald? I mean, he died in prison, if I recall.
A free man. He died in Parkland Hospital on January 3rd of 1967 from a sudden case of cancer. He was dead less than a month after the world learned that he had cancer. But his trial verdict had been overturned. He was a free man when he died. The retrial hadn't even gotten off the ground. And he was the 7th person to die in Parkland Hospital in 1967. So his tissue samples were labeled 007. Goodbye, Mr. Bond. There are theories about what happened to Ruby. You know, he was given a routine physical, but they left him in the room with the X-ray machine on. That'll kill you. He'll die of cancer. Ask anybody that lived within a mile of Chernobyl. Ruby is one of the toughest people to figure out. He's literally a triangle whose 3 angles add up to more than 180 degrees. For all of his profession of his love for Kennedy, he didn't go near the parade. And he was only 3 blocks away. But he was deeply in debt. He owed the Internal Revenue Service $44,000, and he owed business partners in excess of $20,000. Matter of fact, the money was in his car when he shot Oswald, or on his person. It came to a couple of grand. It was immediately seized by the Internal Revenue Service. His family didn't get it, and they took the dog to the pound. One of his exotic dancers got the dog out of the pound.
So let's put this together. Jack Ruby's a nightclub operator. He's deeply in debt. I mean, he owes a lot of money.
Yep.
He's approached...
Loves Kennedy, but doesn't go to the motorcade.
No, he doesn't care about Kennedy, but he's offered a bunch of money. We can solve your problems. Kill the patsy. And then he's double-crossed.
Well,
maybe he was granted some sort of asylum. Listen, in a few years we'll let you out.
He was double-crossed in the sense that he didn't understand the law.
He thought it was okay to kill the assassin of the president.
No. I mean, if you get in a fist fight with somebody, and for whatever reason the guy takes a tumble down the stairs and he's killed, you're looking at manslaughter. It's going to bring 5 years. On the other hand, if you're shining your gun, sitting at the bar one night and saying, "I'm going to go kill Smitty," and you go and do it, that's premeditated murder, and you can get the needle. Now, in those days, it was 3,000 volts. Ruby is thinking, if I just pull my gun out and rush the guy, they're going to think, I went momentarily berserk. I'll sit in jail for 3 years, and then I will have the ultimate nightclub. But what he didn't know is in Texas law, when you reach into your pocket for the gun, you are then planning to kill somebody. You are premeditating it. They tried him for first-degree murder, and he was convicted, and then it was overturned. But I don't think he had any idea. The trick is figuring out two things: timing and how he got in. Because he sent a telegram at 11:17 a.m. on Sunday morning, and the Warren Commission went through interview after interview to prove that the clock in every Western Union office is absolutely synchronized with the United States National Atomic Clock at the Naval Observatory in Washington, and that the Dallas Police Department clock is also synchronized. So at 11:17, he sends a telegram. 4 minutes later, he drops a hammer on Oswald, about 350 feet away. If his goal had been to kill Oswald, he couldn't take the risk that Oswald would have been moved 1 minute before he got there. And if he was going to kill Oswald, he would have done it Friday night, when Oswald was marched through the halls for that TV appearance. Because Friday night, America was still... Any American you could find would have personally strangled Oswald that Friday night. By Sunday, we'd settle back into, okay, the American system of justice is going to take its course, and then Ruby shows up. At the end of the day, it was Ruby's bullet that brought about the Warren Commission and all the noise, because Americans, whoa.
This stinks.
Yeah. One guy kills the president, and then he gets rubbed out by a strip joint owner who's in debt. Something wrong here. We want to know what's going on.
If anything, that's perhaps the biggest evidence against the fact that it's a conspiracy, because it's too obvious.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's the purloined letter. You hide something in plain sight. Geez, I don't know where that stolen automobile is. Could you look behind that red sports car and see if there's one in the garage? When something is as obvious, and Air Force One, they were all talking conspiracy coming home. The Secret Service was talking about it. You know, people in the back on the plane on the way home. Kennedy's secretary.
Was Oswald on that list?
No. He was an unknown defector at that point. You know, Lyndon Johnson. I don't know if she had the Federal Reserve or Mossad, but she certainly would have had a couple of mafia figures in mind. Maybe she didn't know the names, but she knew general disposition of them. And she probably would have included...
Explain the Marilyn Monroe connection. Is there one? Was that a wake-up call? We can get to you.
Yeah, that I strongly think would have been a wake-up call. Was there a connection? Yeah. I'm not convinced there was a connection to Bobby. You know, John Kennedy, his attitude was, hey, you live the way you want to live, and if somebody wants to complain about it, they're only going to do it after you're dead, and then it doesn't matter. That was his stated attitude. He had quite a collection of celebrities, you know, notched on his belt. I'm not convinced that Bobby was as guilty with Marilyn as he was. We might have talked about this at some point. Marilyn, her apartment was being surveilled. There was a yellow Corvette seen in the neighborhood regularly. And that car was also related to a break-in at Judith Exner's place. She's another Kennedy acquaintance, to be kind. They ran the license plate, and the plate tracked back to somebody named I.B. Hale in Texas. But I.B. Hale was the head of security at a large oil company in Texas, and it was his two sons that were, you know, doing what was going on, doing the surveillance, doing the bag job on Exner's apartment. And one of those boys had eloped with Connolly's daughter in 1959. And not long after they eloped, she was found dead with a shotgun wound to the head. He told the story that, well, you know, I came home and she was despondent. She had the gun to her head, and I tried to wrestle it away from her, and the gun went off, and we're all sorry about it. And he walked out of the coroner's inquest with no questions asked, because you know, his father had grease. And Hale, the father, had been an FBI agent, and he had been instrumental in creating the FBI SWAT team. So there's all kinds of connections. But was she the horse's head? You betcha. Who better? If the mob got Kennedy, and the question is who's number two, if not Marilyn, then who's number two? It drops off tremendously to the point where it wouldn't be noticed. 2.5 months before she died, she's got that gown on in Madison Square Garden singing this sultry happy birthday to him.
When did they kill Sonny Liston?
Yeah, because he didn't get to old age. I think he was in his 30s when he died.
He died not too long after Cassius Clay beat him for the second time.
Yeah, he didn't get off the mat, and that was a mistake. Liston was a prison thug. I thought he was, a precursor of Mike Tyson. But Clay was unstoppable. But who could be closer than Marilyn linked to Kennedy? I mean, the mob could have killed half a dozen Sonny Listons, and that wouldn't necessarily be a message to the president. Marilyn's another story.
Tell me quickly about the chronology, and of course you're going to be back on the show. We're going to do part 3. Your 31,000-plus page chronology, I believe it's going to be finished finally this year.
Yes, it has to be.
I mean, since I've known you, you've done 10,000 pages.
Yeah, I'm indexing the last 4,500 pages now, and it's something nobody would want to do. It's broken up into 4 books, for want of a better name. The first one is Dynasty, and that goes from the first Kennedy that came to America until November 22nd. And it traces Kennedys in politics, Kennedys in business, liquor, whatever, John Kennedy's political career, the failure to censure McCarthy, whatever. And then book 2 is November 22nd, November 23rd, November 24th. And the first one is Dynasty. The second one is Death. The third one is Disappointment. And that's November 25th forward to the end of the Warren Commission, when everything was thrown under the rug. And then the last book is called Discovery, which is when hopefully people like myself try to roll up their sleeves and get to a whole lot more of what really happened than the official investigations ever did. And then there are 15 appendices where specific areas are spotlighted so you can get the whole thing all at once. In other words, all the Cuban-related testimony is one appendices. Marina Oswald's changing stories over the years is another one. The collected works of John Kennedy. His speeches, the critical ones, is the first appendix. And that one, of course, ends with the speech he didn't give at the trademark. I like to think of the whole thing as the history of the last 150 years being a lake, and the Kennedy assassination is the pebble that hits the middle of the lake and just rotates outward. It brings in all kinds of other world events that relate to what happened to Kennedy or what happened in politics. One of the appendices is called The Assassination Parables, and it's 300 and some odd pages of famous assassinations. The conclusions, 97% of them are conspiracies. 96% of them, the victim is a whole lot older than the conspirator pegged for the killing, that kind of thing. The most common age of the victim is 46, which is how old Kennedy was. It's not complete. I would never want your audience to think they're getting everything that exists. And I'm hopeful that within 3 years or so, some younger person is willing to come along and pick it up and continue it and add to it, for maybe another 20 years. Because that's what it would take. I mean, I've been at this thing every day for 8 years. And when I mean every day, I mean every day. I've taken 4 vacations for a week. And 2 of them were working vacations. If you line up enough ducks, you really know what the pond looks like. To say the FBI didn't get it done because it's not enough. You have to look at what did the FBI do? Well, here's something. And over the course of 2,000 pages, you realize, oh, they really missed the boat. How many things actually happened at 12:30 p.m. Central Time in Dallas? All manner of things. It took me 3 weeks to index that minute because this person saw something, this person saw something, so-and-so heard something. Incredible numbers of perceptions. The most important thing, it marries the most significant bunch of data ever put in one place at one time. And it marries that to serious analysis. And at the same time, it's entertaining without being irreverent to John Kennedy. I'm hopeful that people I know make donations so that I can just mail 1,000 of them to universities and libraries in the hope that 50 years from now, the world will know that there was a race of people that cared about this.
Wow.
Because that's been the whole thing I've done. I'm driving home from shopping before, and I'm listening to Simon and Garfunkel. I say, yeah, they left behind this body of music. It's incredible. You know, what am I leaving behind? Altogether, about 40,000 pages of what I consider really good work on John Kennedy. That's my legacy. It's no kids, nothing.
That's your baby.
It's it.
Walt, it's always an honor. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, Russ, I always enjoy because you bring out the best.
It's been a hell of a show. We're going to do another one. The audience very much appreciates them.
I'm glad for each and every one of them that still care.
It's an honor. Thank you, Walt Brown, for being on the program.
Oh, Russ, you're more than welcome. Take care, buddy.